Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. They thought this battleship was a myth, until it became their worst nightmare. The war had ended years ago, or at least that's what the galaxy believed. The Treaty of Salara had ensured that no human fleet would ever rise again. The Galactic Dominion, the vast alien empire that had once feared Earth's military might, had reduced humanity to a minor species, their colonies scattered and weak. But they had made one mistake. They had forgotten the Revenant. The Revenant had been a myth, a ghost story whispered in the shadows of war-torn space. It was a Terran dreadnought, a battleship that had disappeared during the final days of the war, presumed destroyed in a desperate last stand. The Dominion had searched for it, hoping to confirm its destruction, but they never found the wreckage because it had never been destroyed. It had been waiting, watching, preparing. Now, as Dominion patrol ships vanished one by one, their broken hulls found drifting in empty space. A single message played over every hijacked communication channel. The Revenant has returned. Admiral Ralk of the Dominion sat in his war room, his claws tapping against the cold metal of the command table. Reports flickered before him, destroyed convoys, missing cruisers, distress signals that had ended abruptly. The pattern was undeniable. Some phantom force was hunting them, and its tactics were disturbingly human. A shudder ran through him. He had fought in the war against humanity. He had seen their resilience, their brutal efficiency, their refusal to surrender even when outnumbered 10-1. It had taken the combined might of half the galaxy to break them, and now something was fighting back. Ralk turned to his second in command, a nervous-looking officer from the insectoid Ara species. "What do we know?" The officer hesitated. "We have survivors from the Draw's wrath. They claim they saw it." Silence fell over the war room. Ralk's eyes narrowed. "Saw what?" "The ship, Admiral," the officer swallowed hard. "A human battleship unlike anything we've seen before, black as night moving without sound. It struck them without warning, tore through their defenses like paper. Their shields did nothing, their weapons had no effect, and then..." Ralk leaned forward. "Then what?" The officer's mandibles twitched. Then it spoke to them. A hush fell over the room. Ralk's breathing slowed. "What did it say?" The officer's voice was barely a whisper. It said, "You took everything from us, now we take it back." The war wasn't over. It had only just begun. Panic spread through the Dominion like wildfire. A single battleship should not have been a threat to an empire spanning thousands of star systems, but this was no ordinary battleship. The Revenant was something else, something beyond reason, beyond fear. It hunted them like prey, striking from the darkness and leaving nothing behind but wreckage and terror. Admiral Ralk's claws curled against the armrest of his command chair as he watched the latest transmission. It was a security feed pulled from the wreckage of the Draw's wrath, salvaged just before the ship had been lost to the void. The footage flickered, distorted by damage, but the scene was clear enough. The Dominion cruiser's corridors were a mess of flashing red lights and flickering holograms, its crew scrambling in confusion. The klaxons howled. "Enemy detected, shields failing, weapons offline." Then the cameras went dark. Seconds later, the feed resumed, but the image had changed. The bridge of the Draw's wrath was now silent. The crew, Dominion officers, hardened warriors, beings who had once crushed human resistance without hesitation, sat motionless. Their eyes were wide, their bodies frozen in their seats. The ship's intercom crackled. A voice, low and mechanical, whispered through the speakers. "Did you think we forgot?" Ralk clenched his jaw as the screen flickered again, revealing the last image recovered from the cruiser's black box. A single massive warship loomed in the darkness, its hull matte black, shaped like an ancient war god. Its presence alone sent a chill down his spine. No Dominion vessel had ever been built like this. No elegance, no sleek design, no glowing energy cores pulsing with alien power. This thing was pure brutality, cold, silent, deadly. And then the footage ended. The Draw's wrath had been wiped from existence moments later. Ralk exhaled sharply and turned to his officers. "How many confirmed attacks?" The Fatara officer hesitated before answering. 17, Admiral, over the past standard month. most in uncharted sectors, but it's moving closer to core territory. We believe. We believe it's hunting key Dominion supply lines. 17 attacks, 17 Dominion warships destroyed in an instant. Ralk resisted the urge to snarl. This wasn't just a rogue battleship. This was a strategy, a long-term, calculated war campaign. This was revenge. "Has anyone engaged it directly?" he asked. The room was silent. Then a younger officer, a reptilian Drari, stepped forward hesitantly. The warlord of the Third Fleet attempted to track it down. Ralk narrowed his eyes, and... The officer's throat bobbed. The fleet never returned. Ralk felt his breath catch. The Third Fleet had numbered over 50 warships armed with the best Dominion weaponry, and now, nothing. No distress signals, no wreckage, just silence. A slow, cold realization settled over him. The Revenant wasn't just attacking, it was winning. He turned toward his command console, bringing up a galaxy-wide map. If this ship was targeting supply lines, there was only one logical next step. The Dominion's most crucial outpost in this sector, Station Varos 9. A massive fortress, heavily defended, armed with enough firepower to obliterate an entire fleet. If the Revenant struck there, it would send a message. Ralk straightened. "Alert all forces in the Varos sector. Mobilize every warship in the region. I want the Revenant hunted down and obliterated." The officer saluted and rushed to carry out his orders, but as they did, a single thought gnawed at the back of Ralk's mind. It wasn't just the power of this ship that disturbed him. It was the precision, the patience, the overwhelming hatred that seemed to guide its every move. This was no blind act of revenge. This was war, and the Revenant had just begun its hunt. The battle for Varos 9 was supposed to be swift and decisive. Ralk had gathered everything the Dominion could spare. An armada of warships, defense platforms, and planetary shields strong enough to withstand a solar flare. If the Revenant dared to attack, it would meet the full wrath of the Dominion. And yet, deep in his gut, Ralk felt something close to fear. For weeks they had chased shadows. No enemy transmissions, no patterns they could predict, just silent death striking from the darkness. Now all they could do was wait. The command deck of Varos 9 was a fortress of steel and holographic screens, alive with movement. Tactical officers shouted reports, captains checked their fleets, and sentry drones patrolled the void. Everything was in place. The trap was set. Then the lights flickered, a small disturbance barely noticeable, but Ralk saw it. The Dominion used the most advanced technology in the galaxy. Their stations did not flicker. His claws tightened against the armrest. "Status report," he barked. A reptilian officer checked his console. "Power fluctuations detected, but all systems are operational." Another flicker. This time the screens distorted for a fraction of a second. Then the alarm screamed. "Unidentified vessel inbound." Ralk shot to his feet. "Show me." The main display shifted, revealing a feed from the outer defense grid. At first there was nothing, just the blackness of space dotted with Dominion warships in tight formation. Then the stars shifted, bending unnaturally, a ripple in the void. And then it emerged, a hulking mass of black metal, its shape a twisted mockery of Dominion design. It did not glide through space, it stalked, moving like a predator through the void. No thruster trails, no energy signatures, just a silent, vengeful ghost. The Revenant. For a moment nobody spoke. Even the battle-hardened officers, creatures bred for war, stared in stunned silence. Then the ship spoke. The station's intercom crackled, filled with static. Then came the voice, cold, mechanical, yet unmistakably human. "You stole our future." The lights cut out. Panic surged through the command deck. Consoles sparked, screens went dark, and the station trembled as if something enormous had gripped it. Then the first explosions rocked the fleet. A Dominion warship, one of their finest battle cruisers, erupted into a violent inferno. No weapon discharge had been detected, no shields had been breached. It simply ceased to exist, torn apart in an instant. "Fire, fire," Ralk roared. The fleet obeyed. 1,000 weapons turned on the black monstrosity, unleashing a storm of plasma, rail fire, and antimatter rounds. The void itself seemed to burn as the Dominion's full might was hurled at the Revenant. For a moment, it was lost in the firestorm, and then it emerged untouched. Its black hull absorbed the carnage like a void swallowing light. Then it answered. Laser fire streaked from the ship, but this was no ordinary barrage. The Dominion's finest warships buckled and collapsed, their hulls twisting in impossible ways. Some simply vanished from existence as if they had never been there, others were left adrift, their crews frozen in eerie silence. It was not a battle, it was an execution. One by one the Dominion ships fell. Ralk watched, horror rising in his chest, as the Revenant moved toward Varro's 9 itself. The intercom crackled again. "You took everything from us." The station trembled. "Now we take everything from you." The last thing Ralk saw before the world went white was the vengeful black warship, watching them from the void. Then the station detonated. The destruction of Varro's 9 sent shockwaves through the Dominion. The station had been a symbol of their dominance, an impenetrable fortress that no force had ever dared challenge, and now it was gone, reduced to nothing but drifting debris and silent distress beacons. The Revenant hadn't just won, it had annihilated them. Across the Dominion, panic spread. Warships abandoned their posts, fleeing to safer sectors. Governors sent desperate messages to the High Council, demanding reinforcements, answers, anything to stop the nightmare hunting them. But no help came because no one knew how to stop it. Admiral Ralk awoke to darkness. His body ached, his vision blurred. The last thing he remembered was the explosion, the station tearing apart around him, then nothing. He was supposed to be dead. Instead, he was alive. The dim emergency lighting flickered as his vision cleared. He was in a containment cell, cold metal walls surrounding him, a single reinforced door sealing him inside. His uniform was torn, his communicator missing. Then he heard it, footsteps. Not the heavy gait of Dominion guards, not the clicking steps of insectoid officers. These were different, measured, slow, human. The door hissed open. A figure stepped inside. Ralk had fought against humanity, had killed them in battle, had ordered the destruction of their colonies. He had seen them break, he had seen them bleed, but the man standing before him, this was something else. Tall, clad in a dark uniform with no insignia, his face was obscured by a black visor, the kind worn by deep space operatives. He carried no weapons, yet the air around him was suffocating with authority. Ralk forced himself to sit up, his claws curled into fists. "What do you want?" he growled. The human said nothing at first. He simply stared, studying him. Then, in a voice colder than the void itself, he spoke. "Tell me, Admiral," he took a step closer, "do you remember Jericho?" Ralk's breath caught in his throat. Jericho, a human colony. No more than that, a graveyard, a place the Dominion had erased from existence decades ago during the final days of the war. The Dominion had turned its weapons on Jericho, reducing it to ashes. Billions of humans had lived there, civilians, families, children, all wiped out in a single merciless bombardment. And now, standing before him, was a ghost of that massacre. Ralk swallowed. Jericho was a casualty of war. The human struck, not with a weapon, not with rage, with silence. Ralk had been trained to endure pain, to withstand interrogation, but the way this human looked at him made his blood freeze. It wasn't anger, it wasn't vengeance. It was justice. "Casualty," the human repeated, his voice sharp as a blade. "That's what you called it." Ralk forced himself to hold his gaze. "We did what was necessary." The human exhaled slowly. Then he reached up and removed his visor. What Ralk saw nearly made him recoil. The man's face was lined with scars, deep and jagged, as if he had barely survived a firestorm. His right eye was a mechanical implant, glowing faintly with blue light. But it was his left eye, the one that was still human, that struck Ralk the hardest, because it was filled with something he had never seen before. Not rage, not hatred, something worse, cold, calculated purpose. "You think this is revenge?" the human said. "It's not." He leaned in closer. "This is a reckoning." Ralk's breath was shallow, his mind racing. "You can't win," he said. "The Dominion will hunt you down, they will." The human smiled. "No," he said, "they won't." He turned and gestured to the cell's single window, a reinforced viewport overlooking space. Ralk followed his gaze, and his heart stopped. Outside, stretching as far as he could see, was a fleet. Not Dominion warships, not scavengers or mercenaries, human ships. Hundreds of them, some sleek and modern, others patched together from old wrecks. Warships, cruisers, fighter carriers. An entire armada hidden in the void, waiting ready. "You thought you killed us," the human said, his mechanical eye glowing brighter. "You only made us stronger." Ralk could do nothing but stare. The war wasn't over, it had just begun. Ralk couldn't tear his eyes away from the fleet beyond the viewport. It was impossible. Humanity's warships had been destroyed, their fleets shattered. The Treaty of Salara had ensured that no human force could rise again, and yet here they were, hundreds of ships gathered in silent defiance, waiting like wolves in the dark. Ralk turned back to the man standing before him, his mind racing for explanations, for logic. How? The human smirked as if he could read Ralk's thoughts. "You believed the Dominion broke us, that we scattered like dust." He glanced at the fleet outside. "But you forgot something about humanity." Ralk swallowed, his throat dry. The human leaned in, voice like ice. "We adapt." The Dominion had spent decades hunting the last remnants of the Terran fleet, ensuring humanity never again threatened their rule. They had crushed resistance movements, assassinated rebel leaders, sabotaged hidden colonies, but they had never found the Revenant. They had never found this. Ralk forced his voice to steady. "The Dominion is vast, you cannot fight us." The human smiled, cold, knowing. "We don't need to fight you." He turned away, stepping toward a nearby console. With a flick of his fingers, a holographic display flared to life. Dozens of Dominion sectors appeared on the screen, their trade routes, military outposts, and communication relays marked in red. Ralk's stomach twisted. They knew everything. The human gestured toward a single point deep in Dominion space. "This is Xeris Prime," he said, "one of your most critical supply hubs." He shifted the display to another planet. "This is Tavares, where your fleet shipyards operate." A third image. "This is the Dominion High Council's secure location." Ralk's heart pounded as realization set in. This wasn't just about the Revenant. This was a war humanity had been planning for years, and it had already begun. The human turned back to Ralk. "Your empire is vast," he admitted, "but it's also brittle. Your people believe they're safe, that their leaders are untouchable." His mechanical eye glowed brighter. "We're going to prove them wrong." Ralk's claws tightened. "You're a fool if you think the Dominion will fall so easily." The human laughed softly. "Easily? No, but that's the beauty of it, Admiral." He leaned in, his scarred face inches away from Ralk's. "We don't need to win." Ralk's breath hitched. "We just need to make you bleed." A chill ran down his spine. The Dominion was built on fear, fear of its power, fear of its control. But what happened when that fear turned against them? When their enemies didn't crumble but struck back harder? Panic, disorder, collapse. Ralk could already see it. The Dominion was about to learn what happened when you pushed humanity too far. The human turned away, stepping toward the exit. The door hissed open. Ralk forced himself to speak. "Who are you?" The man paused. He glanced back, that same cold smirk on his face. "My name doesn't matter," he said. "Only the message does." The lights flickered again. The ship hummed with energy. Ralk realized with sinking horror what was about to happen. They were heading into Dominion space, straight into the heart of the Empire, straight into the fire. The war had begun, and the Revenant was leading the charge. Ralk sat motionless in his cell, staring at the holographic projection still flickering before him. The Dominion's empire, mapped, analyzed, targeted. He had spent his life believing humanity was defeated, that their war machine had been broken beyond repair, but it hadn't been broken. It had been forged into something worse. The Revenant wasn't just a battleship. It was a specter of vengeance, a legend made real, and now it was carrying him, one of the highest-ranking admirals in the Dominion, straight into the heart of their territory. For what purpose, he still didn't know. The ship trembled ever so slightly, a barely perceptible shift in motion. They had entered hyperspace. A voice crackled over the intercom, mechanical yet calm. "Admiral Ralk, you're awake." Ralk looked towards the source, an unseen speaker embedded in the cell walls. "What do you want from me?" he growled. There was a pause before the voice responded. "Perspective." Ralk narrowed his eyes. I have nothing to say to a ghost. A chuckle, not mocking, amused perhaps. But you're more useful to us alive than dead. Ralk stiffened, so that was it. They didn't kill him because they wanted something. Information, strategy, or something worse. He knew how the Dominion operated. He had overseen the crushing of human resistance groups, interrogated their captured soldiers, witnessed firsthand the resilience of their kind. But this was different. "Where are you taking me?" he demanded. Another pause. Home. Ralk felt a flicker of confusion. "What do you mean?" The voice didn't answer immediately. The intercom remained silent for several long, tense seconds before the cell door hissed open. Two figures stepped inside, both human, clad in dark armored uniforms, their visors obscuring their faces. They carried no weapons, but the way they moved made it clear they didn't need them. These were soldiers. One of them gestured, "Come with us." Ralk knew he had no choice. Even if he fought, even if he killed one of them, he was aboard the Revenant. There was no escape. So he followed. They led him through cold, narrow corridors. Unlike Dominion warships, which gleamed with polished steel and elaborate design, this vessel was functional. No excess, no decoration, just raw, brutal efficiency. And the deeper they went, the more Ralk noticed something unnerving. The crew. Humans, all of them, but not just soldiers. Some were old, scarred veterans, their faces hardened by war. Others were younger, barely past adolescence, but their eyes burned with the same fire. Engineers, pilots, tacticians. An entire generation that should have been wiped out long ago, yet here they were, thriving in the shadows. They passed an open hangar where sleek black fighter craft sat in perfect rows. Along the walls, massive war banners hung, not of Earth, not of any single human nation, but something else. A symbol of unity, of survival. Ralk's claws tightened. The Dominion had underestimated them again. The soldiers stopped in front of a reinforced blast door. One of them pressed a console, and the door slid open with a heavy thunk. Ralk stepped inside. The room was dark except for a single table in the center. Holographic displays flickered to life, revealing Dominion star maps, supply lines, fleet formations, and across from the table, watching him with cold, calculating eyes, was him, the man from before. Ralk forced himself to remain still. "What is this?" The human gestured towards the map. "A conversation." Ralk scoffed. "You expect me to betray my people?" The man shook his head. "No, we expect you to understand." He tapped the table and the hologram shifted. New images appeared, planets, colonies, settlements. But these weren't Dominion strongholds. They were human worlds, burned, glassed, destroyed. Ralk didn't flinch. "War has casualties." The man's jaw tightened. "Do children count as casualties?" Ralk said nothing. The human leaned forward. "The Dominion thought they won when they signed the treaty. They thought they had wiped out our fleets, crushed our leaders, broken our will." His mechanical eye gleamed. "But they didn't destroy all of us. Some of us survived, and we learned." He gestured at the hologram again. The image changed to Dominion worlds, bustling cities, industrial planets, fortress colonies. "For decades you made us suffer," he said. "Now it's your turn." Ralk felt something cold settle in his chest. This wasn't just a rebellion. This was retribution. The human tapped the console one last time, and a final image appeared. Ralk's breath caught. It was the Dominion homeworld. "You're insane," Ralk murmured. The man smiled. "Not insane," he leaned back, his voice calm, patient. Ralk understood now. The Revenant wasn't just hunting Dominion forces, it was bleeding them dry. It was waiting for the right moment, the perfect strike, and that moment was coming fast. Ralk clenched his fists. He had spent his life believing in the Dominion's strength, in its unshakable rule, but now, staring at the man across from him, at the silent fleet outside, he felt something he had never experienced before: doubt. Because for the first time, he wasn't sure the Dominion would survive. And humanity, they weren't just back, they were here to finish this. Ralk's mind raced as he studied the Dominion homeworld projected before him. He had spent his life defending it, ensuring that no threat, human or otherwise, could ever reach its surface. And yet now he sat aboard an enemy warship, watching as humanity plotted its downfall with the cold precision of a scalpel. For the first time in his long career, the thought crossed his mind. What if we lose? The man across from him, this nameless specter of vengeance, watched him carefully, as if measuring the weight of his silence. He didn't press, didn't gloat. He didn't need to. Ralk exhaled sharply. You've survived in the shadows, I'll grant you that. But an insurgency is not an empire. The Dominion will never allow your kind to rise again. The human tilted his head. You think we want an empire? He chuckled softly. That's your way, Admiral. Conquer, control, assimilate. That's never been our goal. Ralk frowned. Then what is your goal? The man leaned forward, fingers tapping against the table. Balance. The answer caught Ralk off guard. He had expected something more blunt. Vengeance, destruction, conquest. But balance. You destroyed our home, the human continued. So we take away yours. You wiped out our fleets, so we bleed yours dry. You hunted us, so now we hunt you. His mechanical eye pulsed. Until the Dominion has no choice but to let humanity exist unchallenged, free. Ralk shook his head. And if we refuse? The human smiled. Then we bury you. Ralk inhaled slowly. He had fought many battles, broken entire worlds in the name of the Dominion. He had faced desperate enemies before, but this was different. This wasn't desperation. This was inevitability. A sharp beep interrupted his thoughts. The hologram shifted and a new feed appeared, an incoming transmission. The Dominion emblem flashed on screen before shifting to a familiar face. Admiral Karen, Ralk's superior officer, the one now leading the charge to destroy the Revenant. Ralk's blood ran cold. The human leader barely reacted. He simply turned to the two armored soldiers standing at the door. Bring him, he ordered. They hauled Ralk to his feet, leading him towards the communications console. The transmission connected, and Karen's image filled the screen. His reptilian features were rigid with tension, his yellow eyes narrowing as he took in the sight of Ralk standing aboard a human warship. A long silence passed. Then Karen exhaled sharply. So, he muttered, it's true. Ralk set his jaw. Sir. Quiet, Karen snapped. His gaze flicked past Ralk to the human leader. You should have killed him when you had the chance, he sneered. A Dominion admiral is a liability, not a prize. The human smirked. I prefer my enemy's conscious. It makes the lesson clearer. Karen bared his fangs. You think you're teaching us a lesson. The human turned slightly, gesturing toward the massive fleet outside. I think we already have. Karen's expression darkened. You don't understand what you've done, he growled. Destroying Varro's 9 was a mistake. You forced our hand. The Dominion will burn every human world it can find. Ralk felt his stomach tighten. That was not an empty threat. The Dominion was more than capable of reducing planets to ash, but the human remained unfazed. We expected nothing less, he said simply. But tell me,